Well, then I'm just going to start the recording there, and then it'll be a minute or so while I'm looking for something to talk about.
Hey
there.
Okay. There, we kind of dropped, maybe not for any particular reason, so possibly there we could have just stayed up on high ground.
Oh, excuse me. And that's
Nice
how
kill.
West was won. I need healing.
Heroes never die. My will made real.
Okay, nice picks early on here.
Easy.
Alright, so just to ask real quick, just since we were on the topic of talking about mechanics, and since that you said that is something that you're particularly thinking that you're struggling in, what were you saying your sensitivities at, and the DPI as well?
Oh, that is so I think this game was on 1100 DPI 5 or no, sorry, 4 in game.
Okay.
Um but it's so inconsistent because I play so many other games, like I've never really found a good sensitivity. For
Mm.
me, I think that so later on I felt that I was over aiming a little too
Did you
caffeinated, I guess.
do you say 11,000 or 1100 DPI?
1100.
Okay, just
I
making sure.
dropped it to 800 and increased McCree specifically to 4.5,
Okay.
which felt a little bit better. But it's just like I since the last time I played, I have hyperglides in my mouse now. I got a new mouse pad. Was just
Mhm.
kind of like feeling it out.
All right. So yeah, I mean, like it. So you've just in the past have changed your speeds a lot, and changed your sensitivities.
Yeah.
So I mean, like that, it's usually a good idea to try to stick with one, and unless you feel like it's like really bad and you want to get a new one. That one seems very reasonable to me. I don't see any issue with it. So just keeping that sensitivity and just getting used to it might be a good idea. So you're not like constantly swapping around. So on this first point, we actually seem to be doing pretty decently. We get a bunch of picks early on. We don't die, so not many mistakes being made.
Get into position.
Thank you. Thanks. Put it on my
Okay.
tab.
One thing I'm maybe noticing while we're aiming around is that like we seem to be doing a lot better when the enemy character is moving around versus when they're standing still for some reason. Like we seem to be like actually hitting our shots when they're a moving target versus when they're like a slower target. Like for example, like on the Ana there, who's just kind of sitting there or moving slightly side to side. That's where we seem to be having little bit more of issues, and it seems as though we're having trouble kind of staying still, and that's why I was asking a little bit about your sensitivity, sorry, because it seemed as if you kept going like side to side on people, like you kept over adjusting past them. So one thing I'd mention is just maybe make sure that while we're aiming, that especially when they're not moving around, that we're being a little bit more calm with our aim, that we're actually making sure that we're being kind of smoother, making sure we're hitting our shots. Like that could, for example, being like I'm imagine that you're an arm aimer, right?
Yeah.
When somebody is like, for example, like let's say the Ana, for example, so she's a little bit further at a distance. She's not really moving super fast. That would be an instance where I would say that like you'd put your wrist down on the table, and use your wrist aiming as a kind of to lower your kind of, you can think of it as like lowering your sensitivity, making yourself more accurate. So that just be something, I don't know. You could. It's very hard to say like if you're not thinking about
That's
it.
you're talking about like
Mhm.
anchoring, right?
Yeah,
Like in
anchoring.
other games, yeah, that you anchor your wrist. I've been trying to work on that, but good call because I can definitely see it watching this replay back. But there's no reason why I shouldn't be hitting standing still
Yeah.
targets.
Which that's just something like it's hard to tell. Like if you're not paying attention to it, that might not be even something that you're even thinking about it. But next time you're playing, maybe consider thinking about that of like
Yeah.
how am I using my arm, because it is seeming though as if we are struggling a little bit more when they're standing still.
Like that. Yep.
I need healing.
All right. At the moment, we're not in the best of positions. I'd probably say that currently we're probably not where we want to be. This is a really far distance away from people, and it's really not the distance in which McCree prefers to be at. McCree prefers to be at a medium distance away from people, close to medium distance, because he has fall off damage. And here we're putting ourselves like kind of really far away from people. At the same time, while also being like pretty out in the open, so we probably might find a lot more value out of like positioning ourselves somewhere on the left side of the map, which would give us better angles to like get closer to people. It allows us to like come up from the sides, so like maybe coming from the left. So coming from the right here just doesn't seem to be giving us a whole lot of value, and then it's just putting us at a range in which we're not able to do a whole lot.
Okay.
Make sure that when we're burning and when we're low, we're not peeking and exposing ourselves to the ash. Okay. So there, we got a little bit aggressive and kind of pushed into the ash there, and then that possibly results in a death. We also
Don't
end up
move.
going for just body shots. We aim too low. Make sure we're aiming up at head level there. Though I'm not. We'll see if that's continuing to be a thing. But there we just got like super aggressive and kind of pushed into a poor position, and then that's what got us killed there. So potentially just instead of pushing so far in, you could have just waited for her to come out and then shot at her. All right, so we have our High Noon here. Let's see how we use it.
Take cover.
That'll get it
Heroes
done.
never die.
Okay, that's the second time I've seen us use our flashbang when too far away from somebody, so make sure we're paying attention to the range in which we're using it.
Damages engaged. Not yet. Surrender to my will.
Okay, very nice. Just a better angle to come from would have just been to go above them rather than to go to the side, because here we could just come up over here, and then now this is just a much better angle. We could high noon from here, if we wanted to. Like we could high noon when they all get shattered, because then they just can't do any. Like imagine if we just high noon right here from up here on the high ground. Who's gonna shoot at you? Who's gonna stop you? You can just get a very nice high noon in that would kill a lot of people. Also, just coming in from this angle probably would be doing more because it would get to their back line. One thing I'm also noticing is that we're just a lot of times approaching from the front line and not really taking side angles very much. Make sure he backed up off the ledge. So at the moment I'm seeing a whole lot of a bunch of different things that like it's just a lot of inconsistencies in a lot of different areas. So I'm gonna start calling out like all the things. We'll go more in depth if they seem to be things that are repeating and constantly happening. At the moment, let's just talk about just survivability. We've died quite a bit so far. We've died 1, 2, 3 times, right? Maybe 4 times, right? This one, then the one on the when we ran into and then the ash got us, and then I believe one other time. So at least 3, possibly a fourth, but I think it was 3. Um, and some of these are pretty easily preventable. So we want to make sure we're staying alive and we're not dying in super easy ways, especially if we're like the first person on our team to die, right? That's usually going to be a lot worse of a death than if we're the last person to die. So in this instance, that's a pretty bad mistake if we're just letting ourselves die at the first thing. So we want to look to cut out those mistakes from our gameplay in this situation. Maybe just backing off from the high grounds faster might keep us alive. Like if we just rolled off the high ground, like here, you kind of of see where there's a Zarya starts shooting at us. Here we could roll and roll backwards and run away that way. We can roll and like drop to our teammates is an option. So we do roll backwards, but then notice how we kind of like stay up here for a little bit after we roll up to the high ground. So we kind of stay up here, and we stay up here, and then because we kind of stayed up there and we didn't drop, that's what ends up getting us killed there, when that's decently easily preventable if we just kept running away. So we just want to make sure we're looking to stay alive, and then I think we might talk about target priority if that comes up here.
Heroes never die.
Other thing I'm noticing is that we haven't used our ultimate yet, so we'll see how long we hold on to that for.
Touch from afar. I cast this spell.
Very nice.
Oh, that'll do fine.
Don't focus on the lamp when it's not doing anything in particular. If no one's in it, just focus on the Zarya. There, we also swap off of the Zarya for no particular reason when she's very low, and we probably could finish her off pretty easily. Like here, we shoot at the Genji, and then we swap to the Zarya, right? And then we see that she's low HP, but we swap to the lamp, and then we look away from her, like when we probably could finish her off there, right? Kind of swap away unnecessarily. Mechanics honestly haven't been as bad as I think that you were letting on to begin with. Like it's honestly they're seeming like they're they're not fantastic. They're not the best I've ever seen, but they're also definitely not like hot garbage. And then that means that at the moment I'm looking at more of like a kind of a bunch of tiny things from a lot of different categories at the moment. We'll kind of do a summary when we get to kind of strengths and weaknesses, but we'll continue for now. So this is now fight number 3 where we haven't used our ult. Okay. Okay. Make sure when we're rotating, it is in between fights, not during fights. So right here, we have perfect time to rotate when nothing in particular is happening, right? So at the moment, there's not a ton happening. Neither team has really engaged the other, right? Now our team's brawling in the right room, but that just ended, right? So they're all just sitting main. This is kind of the perfect time to be rotating at the moment to go top left because there's nothing happening. But in the moment here, our team's about to go in and engage. They're about to now. Our tanks are pushed in. They land a big fat shatter. This would actually be the moment where where we want to be fighting, either already on the top left or we just be sitting main. And again, this is a really excellent time where we could be high nooning into it, right? We could probably be comboing a high noon with that, and then therefore getting a bunch of kills off of it. High noon, make sure that we're using the ultimate. This is now fight number 3, I believe, that we have not used our ultimate. And just keep in mind that ults that aren't used are ults that don't get value. Our high noon has gotten 0 value so far because we haven't used it. So we want to make sure we are looking for situations to use it in.
Heroes never die. Protect the payload.
Okay, so we do look to use it there, and then it gets eaten up. So we'll pay attention to the D.Va and make sure we're looking to dodge. We have a couple different ways we can get around the D.Va, right? We can go when D.Va is shattered, which just happened twice so far while we've had High Noon. We can go when D.Va's out of mech, which has been a case as well. We can wait till she's dead. We can wait until she's used all of her DM. We can wait till she's on the other side of the map. We can, if she's like right next to us, we can just wait until like she can, she doesn't have DM infinitely. So if there's only a couple people alive, we can just wait until we just keep charging it until she's used DM and then just outweight it. There's just a lot of different ways to get around her DM, and we just want to make sure we're doing something to get around it. Very nice shots. Very good. Okay. So it's looking like at the moment, it's just I'm pulling from a lot of different areas. Like it's just a little bit of everything at the moment. It's not just what your mechanics are trash, but you'll notice that when we don't properly set up our mechanics with our positioning, your mechanics aren't going to do nearly as much. And when you also are dying constantly, you have less time to do things. And when we're not engaging at the right times, we don't have time to do things. So there's a lot of things that go into shooting people and going pew pew and shoot shoot that aren't just you moving your mouse around and shooting at things. And I think that yes, that does need a little bit of work on it, but I also don't think it's the only thing that we're needing to work on at the moment. It's just a lot of everything. So that's just what we're gonna continue to do. In a couple minutes here, we'll do the strengths and weaknesses. But at the moment, we'll just keep going and try to pull at a bunch of different things and see if there's any reoccurring things that keep happening.
I will say that like one of the biggest things that I'm trying to improve on is just like uh, crosshair placement. I play a lot of
Mm,
Tarkov, and in that game, it's very different.
yeah.
And like that's what I've been doing for the past like 6 months is like hard grinding that game,
Mm,
and it's a big difference. So I'm sure you notice. Like I even notice it looking. I'm
mm,
aiming a lot at their body,
yep.
and in this game, that's not doesn't really work, especially with McCree. But yeah, so I don't
Yep.
know how to
Which
really
is
work on that.
how to work on that. Well, I mean, it's a you work on, and that was something that I noticed as well. As kind of one of the side passing things. That's why I had mentioned it like once before, particularly on the Ash. Now how one would work on crosshair placement, right, and making sure it's in the right place is the same way that you look to work on anything that you're trying to improve on, and that is while you're playing, you're going to focus on the thing you're trying to improve on. You're not going to autopilot while you're playing. You're not going to just focus on winning. You're not going to even just play to play. What you're doing is while you're playing, you're really focusing on the thing you're trying to work on. So, particularly when we're talking about something like crosshair placement, we can use that as the example. While we're playing, our brain would look like this, where we're going crosshair, 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 crosshair. Right? Just try saying that 10 times fast. It's hard. That's what our brain is going to look like, and when we're doing that, you're going to start to notice, oh snap, I'm thinking about my crosshair placement more often, and now my crosshair's in the right place more often. And then when you do that for a long enough period of time, that starts to develop as a habit. And once it develops as a habit, you no longer need to think about it. And therefore, it's just something that comes naturally. And then therefore, you can move on to a different thing. And then that's how the improvement process works. Now, you don't want to try to go over everything all at once because we are talking about a lot of different things. That's also why I'm going to give you by the end of the session, I'm going to give you the kind of main points of what are the main things you want to look to work on, kind of the most important things. You're going to want to focus kind of on one category at a time or 1 to 3 smaller things within a category, not everything all at once, right? Now, that also comes into play is just like if you don't have time to practice, then you're not going to be able to focus on anything and get better at it, and you don't have time to build habits. So that's just why I said that previously as well. So that kind of makes sense with in terms of how one gets better at anything.
Yeah. No, I think a good play would be to get like a sticky note or something, put on my monitor, like three main things to focus on every time I'm
Mm.
playing and stop autopiloting.
Yeah, so that's where notes come in, like in gameplay. That's why I give notes as an extra for people to be able to look back on and play. But I very highly recommend at the end of the session, like go through the main points, and just write them down real quick so that you have them with you. And I go
Right.
through like the five, like there's 5 different categories in the game, and you have positioning, mechanics, awareness, ability usage, ultimate usage, right? Those 5, and we'll go through like kind of the order in which you need to work on them. Once in a while, I'll add in an extra category if there's something else that comes into play. But those are the main ones, and then you can just kind of write down the order in which you need to work on them. Write down some of the core main points, and then we can go from there. Okay, so why don't we talk about? Okay, so it looks like we're going for the off angle, though couple problems with it. So first off, I'd probably say a high ground's just the superior version of this off angle. High ground is like the exact same amount of time that it takes to get there, both of these pathways, right? Except for through high ground, you just have a lot more survivability. High ground in general is just gonna be really, really good for you, and sometimes I'm not noticing us taking it when it is an option. So why don't we just talk about that real quick? High ground, being up here, tons of different things it does for you. First off, all of high ground acts as natural cover. So, for example, let's say like I guess there's no one really in cover, like in a space where we can demonstrate this. I guess right here. Okay. They can see us. We back away from the ledge. They can't see us. They can see us. They can't see us. So all of high ground acts as natural cover because you move away and they can no longer see you and shoot at you. Secondly, most characters in the game can't get to you on high ground. Orisha can't get to you. The McCree can't get to you. Ana, right? Every single character besides like Widowmaker on their team cannot reach you unless they go all the way around to the stairs, which gives you increased survivability. And then even though characters that can need to use abilities, which means that now they're out of abilities. Also, high ground gives you tons of visibility. We can see over there, over here, all of high ground. But we're on the low ground, we can't see any of the high ground. We can't see over on the other side over there, right? So we lose out on visibility. And then finally, high grounds act as an off angle. So when we're on a high ground, essentially, I don't know if we talked about that last time or not, and it seems like we get maybe the basic concept, but there's some times where I would probably say we need to do this a little bit better. But an off angle essentially is just any angle besides the main angle that we can use to get around to the tanks and the shields, right? This would be the
Yeah.
main angle right here. Right, what we're doing right now would be an off angle, or taking the high ground would be an off angle. And high grounds, when it's right above people, do act as off angles. Another example of an off angle would just be like, main angle coming to the side. This gets off angles get you around shields, it gets you around tanks, and just in general, just as a quick target priority, which sometimes we seem to struggle with a tiny little bit, but though it's not like super consistent, is just tanks aren't what we want to shoot at, and shields aren't what we want to shoot at. Supports and DPS are just better targets to focus your time on because they're easier to kill and they get you higher value. We can go a little bit more in depth on that if it continues to happen, but as of the moment, just top would be better than bottom here. And then continuing on, we also like we miss the health pack when we do need some health, right? That'd just be good to grab real quick because that would put us up an additional like 70 HP. Or no, sorry, 50 HP, right? You just get higher HP. We also go in. You could shoot her from here pretty effectively, and then now we're super close to the exit, and we're able to back up really easily, right? So just what we do here is we just go shoot her once, flashbang, go for the headshot, and then back up, right? Or just like be ready to back up if they look at you. Here we have two different options. We could roll main to get back to our team. We can roll this way to get back to our team, but instead we go into them and we roll this way, which puts us in a really dangerous situation that probably, I would assume, gets us killed. Oh, okay, so we get another kill somehow, but we also die, which probably isn't the best play here. When we could just get a kill and then survive and stay alive. Most of the time, you're not like we want to look to cut out these deaths because they have closer spawns here, so therefore that like your death is kind of more
Yeah.
impactful than their death is, because they have a much closer spawn. On top of that, like even going like a 2 KD isn't the best for a DPS. It's doable, like that's decent, but it's better than 0, it's better than 1, but it's also not great if you're looking to carry. You're gonna have a higher KD than 2, and that means that in the situation you'd be better off just going in, getting 1 kill, and then playing passive and getting out, not going in and dying and getting 2 kills would just be better for you. So here we just don't. I don't think that was the play to go for, is to just roll into
Yeah.
them.
That was a hard feed.
It'll take more than that. Join me.
Because based off of that, then they win the fight. Then they win the fight,
Yeah.
right? We lose. Like we're now out of the fight for a whole like 20 seconds. 10 seconds to respawn, 10 seconds to walk back, and then we're also putting our team at a disadvantage, and then therefore that's our impact in losing that fight, even though we got 2 kills.
Yeah.
Okay. Make sure that we're kind of going on a like if we're gonna try to be sneaky here and go bottom right, we're just crouching, not punching, not making loud noises so that we're not super loud, right? Alright, that's unfortunate.
Group up. Group up here.
What's Mora doing?
With me. Form up
I
here.
don't know.
Mora.
Pardon me.
Looking, you kind of see the oh. All right, make sure we're checking our corners when we're walking out of rooms and stuff like
Yeah,
that, right? We always just look left and right real quick, just so we're not getting caught off guard.
I think my flash was on cooldown.
Yeah,
Sucks.
it was on 4 seconds there, right?
That was a mistake. Good play by him.
Yeah, but you know, if we realize that he's there faster just by being aware of it, then we can roll. Maybe try to roll out of the flashbang. We could shoot him faster. We can, you know, get maybe roll into back towards our team. Right, we just have a couple more options that are presented. All right, so we're just waiting on our team to group up.
Heroes never die.
Okay, I like that we take the high ground there. That's good.
Don't move. I need healing.
Okay, what happens to our back line here? I wasn't even paying too much attention. So we get a Widowmaker gets one, and then we have those two alive. How did Reinhardt die? Okay,
Oh, I actually don't know.
I guess he had died previously there.
At
Okay,
this point, I like had no idea we were down so
Mhm.
many. So this is huge overextension. Like looking back at it, I remember in the moment
Yeah.
thinking, "What the hell? Like, how's there an Orisa back there?"
Yep. So that in that case, that comes down to making sure we're watching kill feed, right?
Hmm.
And kill feed will tell you, you know, at any point that we're down people. Now at this point, we're still even. We're still 4v4, but also paying attention to our positioning up on the high ground. There are bad ways to use high ground, and that it kind of applies in general. The good positioning is the usage of cover, whereas bad positioning is the absence of cover. And when we're using high ground in this way, there's an absence of cover because there's nowhere that we're kind of out in the open, and there's nowhere that we can back up to that's going to put us around cover. So for example, being over here would be a lot better because we can back up away from the ledge, and if these guys, we can back up away from the ledge, and we can use this as cover as well, right? Where it's a lot more dynamic, that gives us a lot more options to get around corners and whatnot. But from here, we back up this way, and then those guys see us, so we back up this way, and like we can't even back up far enough for Ana to not see us. So this is just very out in the open. That's why you're not going to want to spend too much time sitting on this bridge usually, just because it's high ground, yeah, but there's no cover anywhere here.
Right.
So make sure we're not out in the open and we're using cover properly.
Easy. Don't move. I need healing. Smart's doing.
Okay, you can just kind of see so there we probably should not be re-engaging and going back in.
I just wanted to die on cart, but
Yeah, there I probably say that's a situation where we probably could have just made it out. We could have just escaped pretty easily because like we weren't getting chased. We were already on our side of the map. We could just back up and come over this way or something and grab a health pack real quick or something. That'd probably just be better because it would put us in a better position and save time versus if we died now we're respawning and walking back from spawn and it's gonna end up staggering us. But in this instance we probably can just make it out. So I probably would say just dying on cart does have its moments where we would do it, but usually the order is you get out if you can get out, and if you can't get out, then you let them kill you. You don't just run in and let them kill you if you can make it out on your own.
my thought process was like trying to get the mercy out, and then I was like, "Oh shoot, I'm in way too deep now. I'm dead."
Yeah,
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I think even after the mercy had died, I think we were still in a decently easy position to run away from. I mean, it's over now.
Yeah.
Right. And then by the time we get back there, that like you can see that staggering though was that like by the time we got back, the fight was already lost, right? And we were separated from our team, and the fight, we had already lost it, so we just wanted to be coming out sooner. Very nice shots. Oh, make sure paying attention to the ball. Right, that is an awareness death,
I
and
knew he was there, and I knew I was gonna die. My thought was like, okay, maybe I can like make it even because she doesn't know I'm here. So I
alright.
thought like I
Well,
was just gonna suicide and try and take her with me, but it was just a kind of a feed.
yeah, so why don't we talk about that mindset though then real quick. Um
Yeah.
KDs like when it comes to KDs, a 1 KD is probably one of the worst KDs you have. I mean, like of course it gets better and better the higher your KD is, but 1 KD is really terrible on DPS. When you kill one thing and then die, that's real bad. That means that you really didn't do anything and you didn't accomplish anything, right? So in this situation, there's so many different ways that we could just survive the ball, such as just dropping to our team. We can just grab. There's a health pack there. We have mercy. We can request healing. We can say it in chat. We can run over to our run over to team being the main thing. But instead, we just kind of AFK and let the ball kill us. Right? Obviously, it's just going to be better to survive and not get a kill. It's better to go 0-0 because then we have the ability to stay alive and actually kill things, and then you have the possibility to go 2-0, 3-0, 4-0 than it is to go 1-1. It's flat out it's better because going 1-1 means that you didn't do anything at all, whereas going 0-0 means that you have the possibility to do more, right? Now how KD works is like 0 KD is like if you're killing nothing, that means you're doing nothing. 1 is pretty garbage, or really garbage. 2 is pretty garbage. 3 is now where you're starting to do like I probably say 3 is like the bare minimum of your job. 4 is where you are starting to do a decent job. That's where that's where I probably say your just job. Your job is done, right? 5 is where you're starting 5 is where you're starting to do a good job. 6 to 10 or 6 plus is where you're starting to really have an impact and do things, right? I probably say if you are like I probably say 10 plus is where you are like carrying, where you're really like doing things where even if your team is trash, you're actually carrying them over that line is like a 10 KD. When you have when you're like 40-4, that's a really good game where you're doing really awesome. So I just want to emphasize the point because multiple times we've done this where we kind of suicide our and to get kills. Keep in mind, surviving is just as important as getting kills, and if not even more important, because when we die here, we are out of the game for 10 seconds. Then 10 seconds while we're walking back, that's a whole 20 seconds, which means that's an entire minute of gameplay for every 3 deaths that you have, right? Where we're just not participating. And then even more than that, we're also putting our team at a disadvantage. We're putting our team down a person, which means that they are more likely to lose that fight because you're not there, and you also lose your ability to do your ability to carry. You lose your carry potential. Whereas if we stay alive here and go 0-0 and we don't kill the Widowmaker, that means that now we have the carrying potential to now get 3 kills in this fight, right? So you really want to make sure that we're just changing that mindset to where now we're trying to survive away from the ball, while also we can survive and still try to go for the kill on the Widowmaker. That's completely fine, but you don't want to try to kill yourself for that the kill on the Widowmaker, unless the only alternative would be if you have no options. If you have no options to escape the ball, then go ahead and try to go for a kill because what else are you going to do? But here we have plenty of options that we can take to try to get away from the ball, right? So that's the big difference. You can go for those suicide plays if you don't have any other option to take, but when we do have options, don't go for it because you're just better off going 0-0 than 0 and then just dying and without getting any kills there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that we're kind of mixing it up a little bit. We're not coming out the same doorway. We're trying to make it harder for Widow to see us. Okay, plop down your Venom Mine somewhere. Plop it down on yourself. This is gonna allow you to duel flankers 2 times easier. So, like for example, the only one on their team who's really gonna be contesting you by being on top of you is gonna be Ball. But if Ball comes in to go on top of you and he gets Venom Mined, well, now he's taking damage from two separate sources, your mine and you, which is going to mean that now he's dying pretty much twice as fast, which is going to give you, if anything, it's just going to put him at a lower health, which can let your team kill him. It's going to put more pressure on him, which can allow you, maybe you can just pressure him into running away before he kills you. And then it possibly could also help you just secure the kill. Like when Ball's this low, like you see he's like already pretty low, that's the difference between him dying and him getting away with killing you and then just escaping. Because this is a low enough health to where you could probably kill him, but we also, it'd be like 2 times easier if we just had a Venom Mine on top of him as well. Right, like there he probably doesn't escape if we have Venom Mine down. Right, we just want to make sure that we're plopping it on top of ourselves, or if we're not doing anything else with it, just toss it into the enemy team to try to get some walls going. Okay, nice kill. All right. Nice shot. Okay, now they're on a Genji, they're off the Widowmaker, so especially we're going to want to have a mine ourselves and just be extra careful. Okay, positioning-wise, how Widowmaker's positioning works is you have two different kind of how in general the game works, right? Is team composition dictates playstyle. When you are up against a different team composition, you play differently than if you are up against a different one. So for example, that switch from Widowmaker to Genji greatly changes how we're approaching the game. So positioning wise, how that affects how we're positioning is when they're on a character like Widowmaker who can snipe us from across the map and can contest us super easily, we need to kind of take pretty safe angles, right? We want to kind of take sneaky angles where we're doing something like this, where we're kind of like on the kind of these like surprise angles that you might not expect, where maybe we do a wrap around and off angles, and we're not being very we're being kind of inconspicuous, where we're trying to get a surprise pick on her, and because we don't want to just be out in the open because she's going to kill us super easily. But when we're not up against something that can contest us that easily from a range, like Genji's not really going to contest us super easily from a range, Ball can't do that, Zarya can't do that, Moira can't do that, McCree can't do that super well. He can a little bit, but not nearly as well as Widowmaker. And same with Ana. Ana can a little bit, but not insanely well. And with those guys, you can run away pretty easily and get behind cover. That's going to change up our positioning to now that they don't have a Widow, we probably want to have positioning that looks more like this, where we're just sitting up here on the high ground, because now we just want to take as much visibility as possible. From up here, this is going to allow us to shoot anywhere we want, where we have a ton of visibility, a lot more than over here. Over here, well, we can see only this left side, one person on their team. Over here, we cover a lot of different angles. We cover left side, main, right side. We cover so much visibility, which even if we're not hitting shots, that just creates pressure, right? It just means that they can't be walking out in the open nearly as free, and if they do, then you can shoot them, right? This just gives us more options. It lets us shoot at more people, gives us more visibility, and it's just how we want to be positioning. So just keep that in mind. Team composition dictates play style, and when we're up against a different team comp, we were playing differently. So Widowmaker versus Genji is a pretty massive change, because now our positioning would go from something like this, where like honestly, this, I mean, like Widowmaker, unless she was going left side, I wouldn't see this getting us much value. But we go from kind of those obscure angles to now wanting to take very wide angles, right? So that's just the difference here. Want to make sure we're implementing that. Also, it's just going to put us further away from the Genji to... that's going to put us further away from the Genji to where he can't contest us as easily. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be trying to contest the Genji here. Like, we just kind of let him exist on top of us when we have multiple things we can be doing here at the moment. First off, grapple. Probably don't grapple just up here when you can grapple to something further away, such as just like something lower down. Also, we keep trying to scope forwards when we know there's a Genji on top of us, place down a Venom Mine. Oh, actually, I guess we just did. We're about to have a Venom Mine in 4 seconds, though, so that's an option we can do in a couple seconds here when we get it.
Yeah, I kept trying to do that with fees.
Right, like now we have Venom Mine we can place just at our feet. We also have SMG. We can just SMG the Genji when he's right on top of us. We just want to do something that pressures him away from us because, again, I think we're kind of going for that mindset that we were talking about before, where we're like, okay, it doesn't matter if I die as long as I get a pick. Which again, that's not true. Just flat out, we need to be able to stay alive so that we can get more than one pick because that's how DPS operate, right? Because then we just die and then now we do 0 things again, right?
Yeah.
Kind of same thing as before, where we don't contest them and we don't think about it, and then therefore we go 0 and 1.
Yep. No, it's same thing that you were talking about before. I
Yep.
agree.
Je ne savais pas que je comptais autant sur toi.
Right. Now that was an angle I liked better. Want to make sure again that we're using our ultimate. We're not holding on to it. Essentially, with ultimates, how they work is you use your ultimate in any fight that you have not won or lost yet, right? So as long as the fight's happening and you haven't won it and you haven't lost it, which has been most of this fight, right, and most of last fight, that is where you're using your ultimate because when they're not used, they don't do anything. And especially Widowmaker is a pretty flexible ultimate because it has I mean, it's not like you're not going to die with it like McCree, and it's pretty flexible to where honestly it's going to get value almost any time you use it during a fight.
Yeah.
So
Just helps the team.
it just helps the team. It helps you. We just want to make sure we're actively using it and not holding on to it because it's just done zilch, nada, nothing. It just hasn't existed, and it's kind of the same thing with our McCree ult as well. It's just we didn't use it, and then therefore didn't do anything, right? And you're never also gonna get like I at the moment it's also difficult to like say how you can do it better if you're not using it at all because I can't even see what you're doing wrong if you were to use it. So just the start is to you actually use it, and then if you're using it poorly, then you can start to improve from there because you can't improve it if you're not even seeing what you're doing wrong, right?
Right.
Now let's go over strengths and weaknesses real quick. We actually probably should have done this a little while ago, but it's fine. We have a 2-hour session, so we'll be able to cover this easily enough right now. But strengths and weaknesses, right? Throughout all of our different categories, what's the highest priorities of things we're looking to work on? At the moment, ability usage, honestly looking pretty solid. There's a little bit on both characters, but not much. I'd probably say Widowmaker slightly more than McCree. McCree, we didn't really have too much with our ability usage that we need to work on. We missed a couple of our flashbangs. Like we thought it had more range than it did. But besides that, we didn't it didn't do much, right? We didn't struggle with
Right.
it very much. Ability usage here on Widowmaker. Want to make sure that we're using our Venom Mine slightly more, just putting it on top of ourselves, just so we can take these flankers out, and then also possibly like if we rewatch this, we might not want to
Je ne savais
use
pas que je comptais autant
grapple
pour toi.
when you're up against again when play style change when you're up against a character like Ball and Genji. We might want to hold on to grapple for an escape instead of just using it
Right. He hadn't
immediately.
dashed yet.
Yep.
I see that looking back at it. I could have waited.
Yep. So, like for example, like here, if we get set up low ground, wait until they come at us, and then we can like grapple up to a high ground, or we could set up high ground, wait till they come at us, and then we can grapple low ground, or something like that. And then what that does is it just gets them off of us, gives us more space, gives our team time to pressure them. So again, that's just how we change against different team compositions. So I'd probably say on Widowmaker it's slightly more. On McCree, it's a tiny little bit. So overall, it's a kind of low to medium priority. Maybe at max, I'd put it at a medium, but I'd probably say low to medium priority on how much you need to work on it. Ultimates, a whole lot more though, because we just haven't been using them, therefore they haven't gotten value. Like, just keep in mind as well, I don't think I mentioned this for some reason. I should have mentioned it, but in this time that like say on McCree, like where we held on to it for 3 fights in a row, during that time where we didn't use it, that's the same. You could get 2 to 3 ultimates in that time that where we used 1, right? Or used 0. Widowmaker, if we hold on to it for 2 fights in a row, that's now time. That's in that time we could have had 2 ultimates that we used in the time that we've used 1 or none, right? So we just get more ultimates out, which gets more value, and then we do a whole lot more with it. So that's the biggest thing is we just not using it currently, and then therefore that's putting ultimate usage up. Which, to be fair, Sights and High Noon aren't the most powerful ultimates, so it's not as big a deal as if you weren't using Blade on Genji, or as if you weren't using
Right.
Grav on Zarya or Bongo or
It's
EMP,
like,
right?
yeah, it's like grab for like everybody I see under Masters, and even at Masters,
Mm,
when they play Zarya, they hold on to grab, trying to get a 6-man every single
mm,
time. When with if you just grab, literally, if you know the right time and you grab one person or two people, you can win the fight like
mm,
that. So, for example, on Zarya, that's on my mind. That was an issue in the past, and then I had worked on it. Now it's like, okay, now I see how fast, if you're playing Zarya correctly and you're always at 80 energy higher, like you're gonna build grabs almost on cooldown,
mm.
and you can just win basically every fight
Yeah,
with it. So
basically
I
same
see
thing
the
applies.
relationship here.
Yep, basically the exact same thing applies to your McCree and your Widowmaker, except for they're slightly less powerful than Grav. So though they are that, like, if this was the exact same problem on Grav, it would be a higher priority. But because it's on Widowmaker and McCree, I probably say it's still just a medium priority.
Yeah.
Um, so it would be higher if it's on more important ultimates. Since it's not, it's a medium priority in comparison to everything else. Moving on, mechanics, just general mechanics of going pew pew shoot shoot, is kind of like medium, right? You're not terrible with it. You're not the best I've ever seen with it. So we're not. It's not the biggest thing, but it's kind of medium. So it does need cross replacement and just getting into shooting does need a tiny little bit of work. So that's kind of medium-ish. But there's also a lot of other things that go into mechanics, right? Making sure we're shooting at the right things, so target priority. That's been a thing that's come into play a couple times, or sometimes we just a little bit too focused on tanks in the front line when we could be going for other characters. We also have just actions per minute, which this one I don't think we've talked a ton about, but actions per minute just being making sure we're doing stuff constantly, which sometimes we take some breaks that are unnecessary, and we want to make sure that we're not taking unnecessary breaks, but we're constantly
So
doing something.
like when we were on attack, third point, walking with the cart for too long in between fights instead of rotating,
Mm.
that is kind of what you're talking
That
about, like
that's an example, yeah, of
repositioning and be good
mm,
action there.
repositioning even in the middle of fights sometimes where you'll just have times where we don't do much, like especially like on rotations. Um, but that one's not too big. So honestly, mechanics again, not going super high. Probably say mechanics is going towards like a medium priority. Now, now let's get into some of the bigger ones. I'd say positioning wise, we have talked a little bit about positioning. Um, on McCree, making sure we're standing a little bit further, a little bit closer when we're not so far back. Make sure we're taking off angles, taking high grounds. Make sure we're using cover properly, right? We're not out in the open, but we're using cover. Good positioning is the usage of cover. Bad positioning is the absence of cover. We talked about how you position differently on Widowmaker versus like taking kind of more obscure angles versus snipers, but then you're taking more out in the open angles and wider angles when you're up against things that can't contest you as easily from a distance. So that's the difference there. Therefore, I'd probably say positioning's coming in at like a medium high at the moment of things to work on, just because of all these different smaller areas that are really adding up. And then finally, we get into awareness, which awareness, I'd probably say comes decently high as well. I'm trying to think of different awareness ones. Being aware of team compositions and how that affects our play style, being aware of when Genji and Ball are on top of us. But even I honestly I don't even think that that's too much of awareness. I think there's some times where we're not aware, right? Making sure we're paying attention to kill feed so that we know when we're up and down people. So awareness is looking like it's going at like a medium again. But one of the biggest things that kind of doesn't fit into any of the categories, particularly that we've talked about, that really affects our whole gameplay was just the understanding how our role kind of works. So I'd kind of put that in kind of like play style ish. of a
Okay.
category, but I usually don't. But that's like I said before. Sometimes I'll add them in, especially when they're bigger things. Is I'll make a category for something. But this one kind of goes into into play style where we kind of so far a lot of times, especially here on the last one on Widowmaker, have just kind of been, and even like when we went in and died on McCree when we rolled in aggressively, we're kind of feeding to get kills, and then that's killing us. And in multiple instances, we just that's we see the outcome of it twice here on Widowmaker. We just, because of that mindset, we've died, gotten 0 kills, and then therefore didn't do anything. And then on McCree, yes, we got kills, but then we also lost or had an impact in losing that fight, just because
Right.
it wasn't super high value. So we just want to change up that mindset and that play style to where now we're playing to survive, playing not to not to die every couple of seconds, because you're going to be doing a whole lot more when you're alive. Making sure that we're playing to get more than 2 kills a life or 3 kills a life, right? Just looking to kill more things and stay alive and do things, and kind of understanding that, and then therefore implementing that into our gameplay is going to be a pretty massive one. So at the moment, that one is looking like a medium high, maybe even a high, to work on. That's affecting our gameplay. So that's kind of where we're standing with everything and how it affects, and what kind of the order in which you want to improve on them for the moment. But we also have another, I believe, hour and a half. Wait, how long have we been doing this?
Oh, it's been exactly
Yeah,
one
been an
hour.
hour. Okay, yeah. So we have another hour. So we'll, this could change up a little bit. So we'll see. All right. If you already have that, let's see. Do we have? Yeah, if we already had that Venomine placed, then it would have activated on the Genji. Therefore, it might have actually would let you win that fight. So here, when the Genji dashes at us, we place Venomine after he's dashed at us, which, because we just placed it, it doesn't actually activate on him. And also, it just me I think it's not necessarily placed in the best place either, because we kind of panicked with it.
Yeah.
But
It
let's say it was
panicked.
like right at our feet or like right next to us. Then that gets him, and then notice here like how much health we do to him before we actually die. Here we do a decent amount of HP to where now he's like that low. Venomine kills him there, right?
Yep.
If we had just had
Agreed.
Venomine down, right? Which could either save us, or it might not even save us there, but it might just secure the kill on him before, and make you go 1-1 versus just 0-1.
Yeah, and that's an easy thing
Hmm.
I could work on and think about.
Yep.
Pardon me.
Okay. It seems like sometimes we're not prepared to follow. We're not. It's not something like we're very good at following up flashbangs with headshots. So that's one thing I would say when it comes to our flashbangs, is that we seem to be missing a lot of headshots after we flash people. Just keep in mind that, like, try to intentionally aim for them and making sure we're watching for it. If Genji is if he's like in the middle of falling, right, and the shot's a little bit harder to go for the headshot, you might want to just right click into it just to be easier. Like if he's in the middle of falling, then you can right click, but also headshotting here does seem like a decently easy headshot. We just want to make sure we're aiming for it, and we just end up just going straight over his head, right? So we just want to make sure we're aiming for them, intentionally going for it, especially when they're premeditated. Headshots into flashbangs do become pretty easily. Just make sure we're practicing at it and making sure we're going for them, because that's multiple times now that I've seen us miss the headshots.
All patched up. Whoa there. I need a doctor. I need healing.
Again, third time now that I've seen us overestimate the distance on our flashbang. So make sure we're kind of getting that down. It is a 10-meter radius. So, if they're within 10 meters, then you can hit them. If they're not, then you can't hit them. There, we just keep kind of throwing it and not hitting people. And then that's unfortunate. We also probably here. Let's see after we miss the shot on him.
Whoa there. I need healing.
Okay. Okay, so here we end up getting booped and then rolling backwards this way. Probably would find more value out of rolling either straight backwards and going this way, because then that would just put us further away from him than just going to the right. And also we'd have cover usage here. We just roll backwards in a weird angle that doesn't give us cover, right? Think of this, right? He sees us, now he doesn't see us, sees us, can't see us, right? But over here, we just have a lot further to run to get behind cover, so we don't use cover properly here. And then another option we also have is to maybe roll over and try to roll off the edge and maybe try to get to our team. But I'd probably say the best option just be to get underneath here and just drop from the high ground. But instead, we kind of
I
roll over to a
agree.
better spot, and then that just makes it super easy for him to kill us.
I totally could have gotten out too.
Mm-hmm.
That strafing was really bad,
It ain't my time.
but
Yeah.
my team does carry that fight, so.
Yeah, and then we've been dying pretty frequently. I think we've died a little bit more often here in the last couple of minutes than we did like the rest of the game. But let's just go. I'm trying to figure just a rough average here. It's a 16-minute game. Let's say like 2 minutes in between rounds and whatnot. So it's a 14-minute game. And let's just say one death a minute on average, just because we've been dying. I might say we've even died a little bit more than that, especially on this last point. So that's where it becomes difficult because it was less consistent earlier on in the game, but now we're dying a ton here.
Yeah.
So let's just say roughly, let's just say 14 deaths. Um, Now, that's a lot, right? And we just discussed this previously, but that means that each death is 20 seconds, right? 10 seconds of respawn, 20 seconds of walk back. Which if you do that math and then you divide by 60, right? That means that you roughly spent this game about 4 minutes and 40 seconds not participating and also actively putting your team at a disadvantage, right? Which is a pretty nuts number to think about, because that's entire minutes of time where you could be charging ults, using ults, getting kills, doing damage, participating, right? Making it so that your team's even in a fight, right? It's tons of time that you could be saving if we just cut out these deaths, and a lot of them are decently preventable, especially the ones in which we are actively looking for suicide, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of deaths here that we could cut out of our gameplay. Where if you cut out 3 of those deaths, right, you cut out 3 individual deaths. Let's say just for example, we cut out the 3 deaths in which we actively suicided, like the 1 on McCree and then the 2 on Widowmaker. That's an entire minute of gameplay that we've just added to our time, where we're participating, where we're doing damage, getting kills, getting ults, and not putting our team at an active disadvantage. In fact, we're putting them at a neutral and or advantage, right? So we just want to make sure we're staying alive because it is really important that we do, and it has the potential to save us entire minutes of gameplay. And that's why, like we said before, when it comes to carrying games, one of the biggest ways that I know I'm carrying a game, and like when I end the game having won the game and know I actually carried it, was when I had a really high KD and low death count, right? When it was, like I said before, like a 44, because it's 4 deaths is pretty decent, pretty solid in a game to have, and you had a ton of kills to go along with it, right? You could have 40 kills and have 10 deaths, and that's now a 4 KD, and you didn't do as much, right? So it's kind of, that's why both are important. It's not just one or the other, because you could have you could have the same amount of kills in there but have more deaths, or let's say you have less deaths but have less kills as well, right? So you could have 1 death or 4 deaths but also have only 10 kills. Now it's not as impressive, right? So you and it's not, you're not actively doing as much. So that's just, I'd like to get you to like to kind of, usually I'm not one to put a lot into stats. I usually just don't recommend paying too much attention to stats, but KD is one of the ones that is decently important on a DPS, and that's one of the only ones that I really pay attention to.
Yeah.
Much obliged. Oh,
Because it just kind of shows you how you're performing in terms of like how much are you actively doing per life.
all patched up.
Nice slash ping.
Don't screw it up.
Okay, so let's rewatch that. So yeah, there we just had a lot of people already looking at us. So yeah, so when
I
you
shocked. I thought I was gonna die, but I could have
yeah.
waited a split second.
We could have. I think that that's kind of maybe a good decision to back off. I don't think that that was maybe the best high noon. So we we've talked to we haven't really talked too much about how to actually use them because I haven't seen you use too many. But in general, you have kind of a couple different points you're looking to get out when you use a high noon. First off, you have of course like you want them to be out in the open. I think that part was fine. They were all out in the open and they had nowhere to run. But let's talk more about the survivability because that was what really messed it up. There was like because we couldn't survive through the high noon, we just ended up canceling it halfway through, right? So how do you actually survive while high nooning? Well, you have three main ways that you can do a high noon and get away with it, right? You have one, which is use protection. That would be as if we just like high noon from like right here behind our tanks and behind inside of our team with a lot of heals and a lot of shielding, where that would give us
Right.
protection that would allow us to get away with it. This is probably, I'd say, your average high noon. You're not going to. It's a very low risk, low reward high noon where you're not gonna get away with a ton. Or you might not get a big high noon from here, but it's gonna give do. It's going to get value, and you're gonna stay alive, right? Um,
Right.
then you also have your off angle high noons or your flank high noons. The difference between an off angle and a flank, by the way, which we haven't gone too much in depth on, would be off angles are short and fast, whereas flanks are long and dangerous or
Yeah.
dangerous. A off angle would just be like taking a different angle from the main angle. So for example, it would just be like this is main angle, this is off angle. But a flank could be like if we went all the way around, where it took 2 times as long. And then also flanks a lot of times are like more dangerous. So just keep in mind, most of the time you're not going to want to go for flanks, and you also most certainly do not want to go for flanks in the middle of fights because it puts you out of the fight for a super long period of time, and it just means that you don't participate. But a flank is an option when you are high nooning. Especially if it's done like right before the fight's beginning. So, for example, let's say we did this, and right as these guys are all doing that stuff, we're right here. So now we can pop up out from behind. When you're doing it from an off angle or a flank, you have a surprise advantage. You are doing it from when they don't know where the heck you are, and therefore you have an extra like 2 seconds while they're trying to find you. Right, this 2 seconds allows you to charge it up. You don't have to because you're going on an off angle or flank. You're going to get around tanks and shields, which means you don't have to charge it up as long to try to get it through. Which means that surprise advantage is really what makes or breaks it. This is a little bit riskier than going for the protection one. I'd probably say it's more like depending on the situation, it's like a kind of a medium risk, but it also has a really high reward. So I'd probably say this is usually the one that you're going to try to look to go for if it's an option, which is not always going to be an option. But you also have to manage that risk and make sure it's not too insanely risky. And
Right.
then finally, you have the long range high noon. So this is kind of what we'd be going for here. But the problem is that they just have too much that can contest us, and it's not far enough. The long range high noon would be like, let's say they're at Anna's range and they're like all the way back there, and we high noon from over here. Well, if they don't have enough damage to damage us, then we might be able to get away with it before they actually kill us because they're just so far away. But when they have
Right.
that many characters that can poke us down, like they have Soldier, McCree, and Anna who can all hit us from really far away, that might mean that you might not want to go for this one. This one's probably the highest risk one. Depending on the situation, it can be it really depends on the situation because these are all situational and they're all going to have their moments in which you want to use them. But I'd probably say in this instance, this is not the one we want to go for. And they're also just a little bit too medium range as well. They're just a little bit too close. So that's just all the different ways you can get away with it. And that one probably wasn't the one we wanted to be using there.
Easy.
Whew. Nasty like back tap there. Pay attention to health bars, right? Comes in awareness. Here we don't. I think that was another one that we talked about before, maybe. But here we don't notice when Anna's 1 HP. We kind of look directly at her, and McCree's also half HP. But we're looking at the Moira, right? And we're shooting at the Moira there when both of those guys are much lower than Moira was.
I need a doctor.
Okay. Health pack has like 2 seconds on it. Might want to just wait for that because it wouldn't distract teammates and it wouldn't put us out of the fight. But rotating for team also is not a big issue. All right, good game. So, yep, we have another like 30 minutes or something like that to just do this stuff, and then we'll get into the review after that time's done. We do have another. Oh, you already linked all the codes to me, didn't you?
Yeah.
Do you have another one that you would particularly like to go over? Because just keep in mind, we're probably not going to be able to go over all four.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. Let me take a look here. I guess I do want you to see like a Hanzo gameplay because that's something I want to get better at. The
All
one that
right.
starts with Y6.
All right. Let me get that up.
And Hanzo, I'm very very new to,
Mm.
so it probably will look a lot worse.
All right. Sounds good.
Too much blood was.
Attackers incoming. Defend objective A.
See that which is
Okay. Good
unseen.
Sonic to start off.
Come and face me.
See through the dragon's eyes.
Okay. We seem to be tossing in a couple not fully charged ones at this range. Um, when it comes to like half, I'm just gonna refer to it like it might not be half charge. I'm just gonna refer to it as a half charge shot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But sometimes it might be quarters, sometimes it might be 3/4. But it's seeming as if we're not fully charging our shots. Sometimes here we're half charging them, and there are the moments where this can be useful, particularly when something's right next to us or they're low HP right next to us. Those are the two instances, especially when a half charge sometimes can be useful when they are like really low. In which case it's going to actually finish them off pretty fast, and or if they're like right next to you. But if they're far away from you, usually you're not going to want to half charge them for multiple reasons. First off, you're going to be doing more damage if you're fully charging it, as well as it's going to be more accurate and consistent. Now you might make the argument, right, that like it's a projectile, so you're going to be just as accurate, like if you get used to it. But I mean, you're also it's going to be so inconsistent, you're not going to ever be able to perfectly replicate like a half charge because it's hard to get that half charge. But a full
Right.
charge is going to be very consistent. You can get the feel for a full charge shot, like you're going to be able to replicate that and continue to do it. So it's just going to be a lot easier to hit a full charge shot than a half charge shot, especially at a range. So just make sure we're not half charging some of these shots in which we half charge them. Like we do one right there, which just kind of went to the
See
floor.
through the
Doing it with
darkness
Sonic though,
eyes.
no issue with doing it with Sonic. In fact, is actually gonna be really good because it means that you don't have to spend so much time lining it up. It's just half charging Sonics is fine. But then we do it on the Tracer. Was just that would have hit her body and did very little damage while also very hard to hit. And then we fully charged one there, so that one's fine. And then there, that's fine. See, our movements seem like incredibly frantic.
See through the
Like we seem like we're just like flicking with like half of our shots here. Okay. So far, not a ton.
I need healing.
Go. I'll keep you healed.
Okay. Keep in mind that on Hanzo, when you're at a range, you need to aim slightly higher than their head, as you do have a slight dip in your shots. So here we're aiming pretty low. Other thing is this is kind of unnecessary, useless when we're kind of doing like some climb shots. Like that doesn't really do much when you're just spamming down the corridor. Just shoot here normally. I don't think that there's too much of a use in doing these kind of fancy climb shots, right? Unless you're being like actively shot at and pressured, which on their team they don't have a ton at the moment. Like I think their Hanzo's respawning, so you don't have a ton to worry about. Um, we're also just aiming pretty low here. Like if you just look at crosshair placement, which is hard to look at when you're doing the climbing. But
I'm
you
not
can,
allowed to do that. I don't normally do that.
yeah. All right, we're 2 minutes. This is kind of the same thing that we did with McCree too, but on I'm gonna mention it because we're doing it with Hanzo as well. Um, Both McCree and Hanzo are mid-range characters. So let's go over McCree first just to demonstrate this because we did this a little bit with him. McCree is a mid-range character. First off, both of them don't prefer a close range because when you're right here on somebody, there's other characters that just do this better. Like think Reaper, Mei, Ryan, right? They just do a close range better than you do, and therefore you don't want to be up here bar a couple different characters and in duels it's fine, but like in general you're not going to want to run at a team and be at this range, right? So usually you start this off at like 10 meters, but on McCree in specific, right? McCree is 10 meters to 30 meters. Now McCree also has what you call a fall off damage. So sorry, excuse me. McCree has fall off damage, so when we're right here, we do 1, 2, 3 shots, but when we back up to here, now we do 1, 2, 3, 4 shots, right? Which means that we take more shots to kill. We back up here, it's 5 shots. Back up here, now we're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shots, which is taking twice the amount of time to kill somebody. And also, it's going to be much harder to hit these shots because the further away you are from somebody, the less accurate you're going to be, right? So from here,
Right.
it's just a lot harder of a shot to hit than it is when somebody's like right here on us because it's a bigger target versus smaller target, right? And at a range, it's going to be really difficult to hit those, right? Now, the exact same thing applies with Hanzo. Now, Hanzo technically can theoretically play from any range because he can one-shot from any range. Notice here how if I aim head level that I'm just adding in something. If I aim head level, you're going to hit a body shot because it does have a slight dip. So if we're trying to hit a headshot, we're going to have to aim right above his head. So like right about here, and then that's going to be a headshot, right? But Hanzo, though theoretically he can hit shots from here, it's also just going to be super inaccurate. Because from here, it's very difficult to hit shots because he doesn't have a scope. He doesn't have a lowered sensitivity. On Widow, that's different. On Widowmaker, you have a scope and you have a lowered sensitivity, which means that you can zoom in and it's going to be more accurate. But from back here, it's going to be pretty hard shots to hit. So therefore, Hanzo prefers a closer range. Now, I'd say that because he doesn't have as much health and because he doesn't have a flashbang, he's not as close as McCree, so you wouldn't start here. I probably say that Hanzo prefers maybe starting at like 20 meters, so like here, to maybe like 35, right? So like kind of within this range, maybe like 15 max there. And that's the range in which he prefers to be. Like he tries to put himself actively within this range on people. Maybe if I were to clarify here, maybe it's like 15 to 20-ish to like 30 to 35-ish, roughly, depending on the situation. Right, is where he prefers. Now, if you're just, it's not to say that you can't play at a long range if you're forced to be at a long range, or if you're just walking back from spawn or something like that, right? But you don't want to actively put yourself at a longer range, which is what we actually do here in the game. Is you're gonna notice, I don't know what map are we on, Eichenwald. Oh, that's
Yep.
where here it is. Okay. You'll notice here that we actively multiple times back up to take the top high ground behind us, which puts us pretty far away from people. Like here, I don't know where we were. Oh yeah, we were definitely ahead of this. Like here they push in and we are gonna pull back and go to the high ground behind us, which just probably isn't what we want to be doing. So here we pull back and go to this one. Honestly, this high ground's not doing too much for us. It doesn't provide an off angle. It doesn't provide a ton of cover usage because of just like the angle in which we're taking. We'd have to like, if you take a look at this, like we'd have to back up really far for it to really do much from the high ground.
Yeah.
From here as well, we just don't get as much visibility because it's just like you get pretty much the same visibility if you're on low ground, and it's just putting us really far away from them. So just keep in mind that not every high ground is going to be a good high ground. There are times where you don't take a high ground. Like obviously you're not going to take this high ground because it's nowhere near the fight, right? There are
Right.
times where high ground's not useful, and this is one of the cases. Now this does change if they are directly underneath you or on point. That is different because now this high ground does more. The closer they are to this high ground, the more beneficial it's going to be for you, because now it does act as an off angle, and now it does give us additional cover and survivability. But at the moment, this is doing nothing but just putting us further away, where you'd probably be better off if we were sitting like down here at a medium range, right? So we just want to make sure we're not unnecessarily putting ourselves, because right now we're at like a just eyeballing it like a 40-meter distance ish, which is just outside of the range, maybe 45 meters. Like that's just outside of the range in which we want to be playing at, right?
Nano boost administered.
Nice shots. Again, we're just kind of playing like a Widowmaker with a positioning. We're just really far back. Push forwards more aggressively when your team is.
My ultimate is ready.
All right.
Marked.
My ultimate extravagant surge is ready.
I am ready to unleash the dragon.
Uh-oh. So we just get headshot there. It's like, was there anything that we did wrong, or we just get domed? Because that happens sometimes. Make sure that we're not hanging on the same angle for an extended period of time. That's kind of the same concept in any sniper battle. Now, I would consider on their team, I'd like say like they have like a Zenyatta and Hanzo, which classify as kind of the snipers, right?
Right.
Usually, you're not going to want to hang on one particular angle for too long, because then you become very predictable, and it makes it super easy for them to shoot you. That's why when you're in like a Widow 1v1, for example, you're not going to just sit here the entire time. You're going to rotate. You're going to go left. You're going to go right. Like usually, I'd probably say that like 75% of Widowmaker duels are won by just seeing the animated Widowmaker first,
Yep.
and having that sight lines. So that's kind of the same kind of concept that applies here. Just make sure we're not sitting in the same spot for an extended period of time. So instead, move around, like kind of rotate from here to over here to over here to right, and then go back again. All right, don't just sit in the same spot over and over. The other thing is that we don't seem to be moving around very much. We kind of have like a yeah, okay, so we're at 230. There, we don't really seem to be moving around very much with our movement, and we'll just go over some movement real quick and how you can utilize it. So when it comes to moving around, you have what you just call your basic AD strafe. There, what we did was we were kind of like going forwards and then backwards to the side, forwards, backwards to the side. That's not a very effective strategy, as if you notice, when we just go forwards and backwards, we stay the exact same place on the enemy screen, right? It's essentially
Hmm.
just not really moving at all. Like if we just do this, we're staying on. We can just not move our mouse and still be on their head, right? Just because it doesn't really do anything. Instead, if we're moving side to side, now we're moving ourselves off of their screen and back onto it. So this becomes a lot more versatile, and it makes it a lot harder of a target to hit. Moving targets are much harder to hit than targets who are standing still. Right now, you don't want to move too fast, because if we're doing this, then we're just basically standing still, right? If we're just going too fast here, right? And if we're going too slow, then we're just moving in a straight line, and that makes it super easy. Instead, we kind of want to find a medium, kind of nice pacing where we're going side, 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 side. And you're not going to want to just do this in the exact same pattern, side, 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 side. You're going to want to mix it up. You're going to want to be random with it. Just, you're not going to just press AD, AD, AD. Instead, you're going to go AAD, ADDDA, right? You're just going to mix it up, go around, be random with it, add in crouches, go from side to side even while you're scoping in. This is just going to make you a much harder target to hit than when you're not doing any of this and you're just standing still or just walking forwards and backwards. So this is just how movement works. You want to get used to it so that you're just a harder target to hit, and this can help you not get sniped and domed in the head. Besides that, not much you can do about getting sniped and domed in the head, if unless you like knew that where they were.
Yeah, it does happen, but I see what you're saying. That was kind of like botting out my movement.
Mm-hmm.
Traveling to Eichenwald
All right.
for battle.
All right, and then we get picked first there, which of course, we just don't want to be getting picked first, because that's not very good.
Right. I was calling for grab dragon,
Yep.
and yeah, this was really dumb.
Yeah. At the moment that we dragon, let's rewatch that. All right. That's unfortunate because he kind of died like right as we pressed the button, Reinhardt. Because like if we waited like an extra 2 seconds, then that would mean that we would have. So okay. So what I would probably say in this situation, I would do, is don't release the dragon like the moment that you leave spawn. Rather like because for all you know, because like, basically you don't know what's happening in the fight, right? For all you know, you could be losing this within the next couple of seconds, which is what happens here. You guys do lose this fight like right at a couple seconds after you launch the dragon. So what might be better is to wait more towards like when you're right here or a little bit closer and then launch dragon, and then that would give you more time to see are we winning or losing this, or are we even or what. At the moment, this just makes it a wasted dragon because we end up losing that fight. It's a 3v6 before we
Yeah.
actually make it back, which just means that the dragon's probably going to go largely wasted.
See that which is unseen.
And that doesn't do anything, right?
Yep.
Notice the crosshair placement, just aiming really low to like to the knees. Nice shot. Now that's better crosshair placement when he's on a slope like that.
The payload.
Half charging the shots.
See through the dragon's eyes.
Enemy contact.
Half charging the shots. Right, just fully charge those shots. Gonna be more consistent, accurate, and do more damage. Yeah, just doing a lot of those half charge shots. Okay, Sonic so far has been looking pretty good. Storm Arrow been looking pretty good. I probably say Hanzo has a little bit more impactful abilities than Widowmaker McCree do. And so far they're looking pretty solid, so not a big issue with them. We're using them in pretty decent times to use them. Here we're actively putting ourselves at a further range again. Okay, now we're this is fine. I like the range or the positioning here. Just use Storm Arrow off a cooldown, just toss it in. There we kind of backed up unnecessarily. All right.
See through the dragon's eyes.
Okay, we're blue team. We don't have a grab here currently. That's not the best dragon. So when it comes to dragons, again, you have a couple things that you're looking for. First off, usually a good idea to Sonic before you go for a dragon. Sonicking is going to let you know where people are. And then that especially comes really important in the second tip here. Or I guess first tip I'd say is do dragons behind walls. So for example here, if we're doing a dragon from over here, this does multiple things for us. First off, when we dragon, we're basically standing still, which makes it super easy for us to die. So standing behind the wall is going to negate that. Secondly, standing behind the wall is going to greatly confuse the heck out of them and where it's coming from. When you're out in the open, they see where you are and they can see where it's coming from, and it's also going to mean that the dragon's going to be out in the open for the whole for most of the duration. Whereas if you throw it through a wall, that's going to mean that they don't know
Hide
the
behind
direction.
walls. So, like you're saying, try and catch them off guard. So when they go and try and hide from like the open area behind a wall, all of a sudden it's hitting them
Yeah,
where they went to
and
rotate to.
exactly, and it's also just going to make it so that they don't know where it's coming from. It's going to be a surprise, right? Rather than if they see it coming, like if they're just standing here and they see it coming, and they can just go, "Oh, no, we're good," right? They just dodge out of the way, which is what happens to a lot of them. Also, on that note, I would say this is done a little bit far away, just a little bit early, kind of to that same note of when you're doing it from really far away. Unless it's done like super far away, like from spawn, this is different because then it just confuses them and now they're going, where the heck is it? When you're doing it from kind of a medium range, usually medium range is like the worst range you can do a dragon at because they just have a lot more time to react to it and dodge out of the way because they can see it coming and then you just see they all run away from it, right? So that's just a bunch of tips and tricks stuff. Now, also, you want to make sure when we are dragoning that they're in a good spot for it. which usually is going to be when they can't run away. It's kind of the same thing as when we're high nooning. We want to do it when they're out in the open and they can't run away and get behind cover. With Dragon, we want to use it when they can't get away from it. So, for example, here, that would be when they're in like a choke point. So if they tried to if they tried to come through here, or they tried to come down main, right, and we would Dragon right as they reach right as they're inside of this doorway or in the main, and then what that means is that now if they're trying to run away, they don't have any they can't just run to the side as easily, right? They
Yeah.
instead are a little bit more stuck, and it also would do a better job of cutting them off. So additionally, usually it's a good idea to throw Dragon behind, like kind of in front of where people are moving, unless I guess unless it's one in which they're in a choke, you're going to throw it to basically where they're going to try to run away to. So for example, like if we're doing it, let's say we throw a Sonic, right? Let's just set this up a little bit differently. We throw Sonic in there. We can see them through the wall, so we know where they're at, right? Let's say we Dragon from this angle, right? Rather than dragoning straight on top of the Roadhog and the Reinhardt and the Genji, we throw it to slightly to the left, because where they're probably going to run to is probably going to be backwards. That usually it's going to be backwards, so that's going to be more likely to catch them in it than if we just toss it straight on top of them. Now it's a lot, but there's even more. Sorry about this.
You're fine. You're
um,
fine.
yeah, there. On top of that, this is done really early, which has multiple points to it. First off, it's just the fight has not begun yet. When the ultimate's coming in this early, and this applies for like most ultimates. If it's done this early, when the fight's not even started yet, right? They still have people walking back. No picks are being thrown. No one else is using ults. Like no one's like next to each other, so the fight has not begun yet. That means that they can put a ton of time, like a ton of basically brain power into dodging your ultimate. Whereas if the fight's in the middle of happening, let's say people are brawling and they're fighting and picks are flying and the people are using ults and it's chaotic, now they have a lot less brain power to put into dodging your dragon. Therefore, it's going to do a whole lot more. Um, and that's really the big one.
No, that helps a
Yeah.
lot. I think, as I was telling you, like I'm so new to Hanzo. One thing that I can definitely tell is my mindset for like casting ults. As I play them more, I feel like I'll start to recognize
Mm,
situations in places where people aren't able to, um, retreat and be able
yep.
to kind of trap them and cut off resources, whatnot.
Mm,
But yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying. I never really known the um, like utility
mm-hmm.
and the way to use it. I've never really thought about it other than just playing for Grab Dragon.
Yep. Another way that you can use your dragon, again, outside of grab dragon, right? Is you can use it to cut off people. So this one's decently easy, but then also pretty high, like high big brain, I'd say, right? So let's say Reinhardt walks through choke and the whole team's walking through choke. This is again like the time that we said that where it's going to be get the highest value. But let's say we kind of did it at this angle. Well, now what we can do, or even if I guess even if we did it from this angle, but what we can do is we can cut off Reinhardt from his team, which would mean that that separates them, allows our team to run over the Reinhardt, or the tanks or whoever we cut in half, and then also is gonna make it much more difficult for them to be able to heal the Reinhardt, because it's really hard for them to like heal and support him through the
Right.
ultimate. So you can use Dragon in that way as well, to cut off people from like cut a team in half or cut off their tanks. Make sure not shooting into the deflects. Good job taking high ground. I like it. Oh.
Yeah, I
So.
thought the fight was over at that point. I don't know why. I just did not look at kill feed, or I think honestly, I think the comms were pretty chaotic, and I think
Mm,
I in my mind at that moment, I had a decision to make whether to jump to die on cart or to try and get out. I just made the wrong decision at this point.
okay. Yeah. So that's just us not watching kill feed, right? I guess we've talked about this a couple times, so why don't we just go over it real quick? We might have talked about this last time we did a session, but we'll just do a quick review. How to tell whether or not you've won or lost a fight, because this has been a thing that's been not like super direct yet. I think it's just we haven't found a good situation for it yet. But there have been like three separate instances where it's kind of been like a side point.
Yeah.
When you are up 1 to 2 people, that is an advantage, right? That means you can play more aggressively because they have less people to shoot at you, less people to tank, less people to heal, right? You can get away with more. When you are up 2 to 3 people, that is a one fight. When you have won a fight, and you no longer need to use ults because that'd just be overkill. And you also want
Yep.
to look to play super aggressive to go in and finish off kills, go stagger them, right? You want to just go finish them off, right? Now, this also goes the exact opposite way. When you are down 1 to 2 people, that is a disadvantage, right? That would be currently the fight right now where we are down one person. It's a 6v5. That is a slight disadvantage at the moment, which means that we just might want to play a little bit more passive than usual. But we didn't lose the fight yet. We are just losing the fight. When you are down 2 to 3 people, that is a lost fight. At that point, you no longer want to use ults because that would just be wasting it. And then also you want to look to get out if possible, and if you cannot get out, you want to look to let them kill you. In this situation, we can see by watching the fact that no one died in kill feed and just looking behind us and paying attention to our surroundings, awareness, that obviously this is just a slight disadvantage. This is not a lost fight, and then therefore we just kind of like hop off the edge here into their team, right? And then that got us killed, right? Just being out in the open. When in fact we were actually we went from losing that to actually winning that because notice while we're in the middle of feeding on a cart, our team gets 2 picks, right?
Yeah.
So just pay attention to the environment, make sure not hopping on the cart.
Yeah.
Because that's just that one's just a super easily preventable death if we're just paying attention.
Hello. See through the dragon's eyes. Mocked.
Okay, usually you're gonna want to throw Sonics in the place, basically in the place where you would collect the most important information. Particularly, that means that you're not gonna want to just usually chuck it at the front line, but instead you're going to place it on the angle in which you want to know when people are coming to you. So kind of like as an alarm detection to know when people are flanking. So because
Yeah.
so in this situation, for example, the obvious thing would be to, instead of just plopping it down main, what we can do with it is placing it on the high ground. So like if we, for example, took it and chucked it right here into this corner, this would detect anybody coming stairs, anyone in this inside area, and to detect if anybody is climbing high ground, say Hanzo or Genji, right? Which, even if the tanks aren't coming high ground here, Hanzo or Genji, there's probably a good chance that one of them might try to come high ground, and it's probably really good information that we know that, right? At least at the very minimum, we know that they're not there, right? Or if they are there, then we know that they're there, right? So even like it kind of so that if you think about it, it acts as an advantage whether they're there or not, because if you use the storm arrow or the Sonic and they're there, you know they're there. If they're not there, you know they're not there, right? So it acts as a
Yeah.
clearance, acts as a check. It it tells you whether or not they're there or not. You can use kind of your Widowmaker Venom Mine in a similar way once in a while. Like if, for example, like if we were up here on the high ground, we could like toss a Venom Mine down here or toss it like right here at the corner, and then that would tell us if somebody's coming up next to us, right?
Yep.
From the flank. So here, just toss a Sonic into that left room rather than just down main, and that gives us more information. Half charging a lot of our shots, like we just toss in a lot of those. Oh snap! I didn't mean to go that far back. Just meant to pause it. Let's rewatch that. Where the heck are we at? Okay, we're right here. Also, I think, yeah, we just kind of leave cover and go really far out into the open. So watch our positioning. Remember, good positioning is the usage of cover. Bad positioning is the absence of cover. Use this thing. I guess there's not a ton more to use. You can back up to this thing. You can use your tanks and try to get them to shield you. We just kind of play out in the open here, which just means that we can get shot at. Nice shots. When you're shooting through this thing, just as a tip, that like I play Hanzo quite a bit. I play Hanzo decently a lot. Just as a quick tip for him, it's not necessarily anything that I see you doing wrong at the moment. Is just intentionally aim for body shots when you're going through this thing, because you can one shot body shot, and a body shot's just going to be a bigger an easier target to hit. Now, usually you
Okay.
want to aim for head level when you're up in any other situation, because you want to go for the one shot headshots, right? But in this situation when you can go for one shot body shots, you just basically want to aim for bodies anyways.
Come on, see through the dragon's eyes.
Just use your Sonic Air off a cooldown, just to make sure we're getting information in there. Reveal people. There's no reason just not to use it here. Nice shot. Oh, make sure we're paying attention, using our eyes. Awareness is seeming like it's creeping in a little bit more and more. Because in this situation, our ultimate's not needed, even though we toss a grab out. So let's rewatch this. First off, we have to identify the fact that we're already up a ton of people, right? At the moment, it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 versus a 1, 2, 3, and then basically that's it. Maybe 3.5 if the Zen comes back. We also
Yeah.
can take a look at health bars. Reinhardt, there's a ton of things that go into whether or not you're winning or losing a fight besides just kill feed. That's why 2 is the middleman, right? That's why it goes 1 to 2 and then 2 to 3, is because there's a whole lot more that goes into it, right? Which team has better positioning, which team has more health, which team has more ults, which team is using more ults, which team has better spawns, right? There's a lot of different things. At the moment, pay attention to their health bars. They have Hanzo's like 1 HP, Ryan's like third, right? Ana's down a little bit as well. Our entire team full HP. Which team is using more ults? Zarya just grabbed, right? We're already that's in another advantage. Which team has better positioning? Currently, they're in the middle of bridge, which is very out in the open, not a whole lot of cover. So our team has better positioning. Which team has closer spawns? We have closer spawns, right? We have a ton of different advantages. That means that even if maybe let's say this was like a 6v4, might still be might still be winning this, right? Which would mean that we probably don't want a dragon, right? And then on top of that, by the time we dragon, Reinhardt's also like 1 HP. Yeah, so he's like 1 HP there. And which means
Yeah.
that he's already dead by the time we end up dragoning. So just pay attention to our environment so we're not making mistakes like that, right? Right, so we have what happened?
Yeah. I forgot this game. I had somebody calling me on Discord. So that like really loud,
Yeah.
and you have to like alt tab out of it.
Yeah,
And
so that's why I keep Discord on Do Not Disturb.
yeah, I should do that. And I was actually in the call with them for a lot for the second half of this game.
uh
So I actually don't remember. I might have made some like really dumb mistakes, not being able to hear much.
Yeah. Also, just a distraction as well.
Yeah.
Toss a Sonic in there just gives you and your team more visibility and information, right? If there's no like, if you can see, for example, like you don't need to Sonic like the side angle if like you just clearly don't need to. So for example, like if you see every single person on your screen, there's no one flanking. If we can do a quick head count and see there's 6 people here, no one's flanking. Therefore, just toss a Sonic in there, right?
Okay.
If you don't see everyone, now you might want to be concerned about it. But the other thing is that like it's not as pressing of a flank if someone goes left side here in comparison to when we were on high ground, because when we're on high ground, it's the difference between basically us dying and living or us keeping our really good positioning. If they go left side here, they're pretty far away from you. You'll probably spot them pretty fast if they come through. And also, as you just have more teammates there to react with you and contest them, so it's just not as important of an angle to be aware of. So you just wanna Sonic, and there's my main point here.
Okay.
And here we step in pretty close through this. Okay, very nice. And then that's round. All right.
4, 3, 2, 1. Attackers incoming. Defend objective A.
Stay out of my way. See through the dragon's eyes.
Oh, massive. Nice shots. All right. No issues there really on the attack. Why don't we get out of there and we're going to do wrap up the session. We're going to do main points, and then we'll do the review along with that, and then we'll wrap up the session from there. But one moment, I'm going to go close my door.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm back. All right, so we went over Hanzo, McCree, and a little bit of Widow as well mixed in there. Let's just start on McCree, right? So main points. Number one, let's think through this real quick, because I don't think, what do we have there? We had, trying to think, because we had the play style thing, which is a pretty big one.
I think the biggest thing, even aside of what we've watched, is when I try and play aggressive, I'm not really considering my own life.
Yep.
And that's the fault of it is like I was telling you, like my buddy is a very, very high rated player, can watch my gameplay and say, hey, you're a 50% win rate player because you are not the carry factor. You're not doing anything exceptional other than the games that you hit a bunch of headshots or whatever. So you're never going to climb unless you figure out a way to take risks and make plays. And when you do try and do that, you're either too late, you're not in the right position to do so, or that your team has already started dying and you're not able to turn the fight at that point. So
yeah. So
yes.
that I would say that's very true, but you have to basically what I would say to that is that there's a time and place to get aggressive, and you also want to make sure that when someone's telling you that you need to get more aggressive, that you're not taking it too far. So, for example, here, let's come up with a scale for aggression. Aggression has a scale where you're usually going to want to be around 0 is a passive, right? 0 is passive. 100 is aggressive. Usually you're going to want to sit around a 50%-ish, right? That's where you want to be on average. Now, you're going to go up and down the scale according to the situation, but if in general you are a like 30% player, where you just constantly are at 30 too much, telling you to get more aggressive isn't telling you to go to 100 all the time. Instead, it's telling you to just bump it up to a 50, right? So I wouldn't say that by any means you should constantly be at a 100, because that would be way too out of place, and it's going to lead to you dying and whatnot. But you do want to tone it up a little bit, right? Now, you do get aggressive and passive in certain situations, right? One moment. All right, sorry, I'm good. So you do want to get aggressive and passive in certain situations. So, for example, kill feed is a good example of this, right? So when you are up 1 to 2 people, that's where you bump it up to like a 60, 70, right? Aggression. When you're up 2 to 3, that's where you bump it up to like an 80, 90, 100, right? When you've won the fight, you can go bump it up all the way to 100 because you have such a massive advantage. When you are down 1 to 2 people, that's where you might want to tone it down a little bit to like a 40, 30. When you are down 2 to 3 people, that's where you might want to go down to 20, 10, 0, right? So that's just a rough scale of like how you'd get aggressive or passive based on what's happening around you, right? On average, you're going to want to sit around 50%, or you at least start there kind of as a default, but there's going to be things around you that impact it. Now, you're not always going to want to be at 100% because that, in fact, can lead to more mistakes than just being at, like you don't want to be on either end. You don't want to be too passive or too aggressive, right? So you just want to make sure you're adhering to that, right? And we're just being a little bit more aggressive on average, but we're also not looking to go in and feed when we're going for it, right? You want to make sure that while you're going for those big carry plays that we're not feeding to do it, right? Because then that kind of it kind of feeds into like our frantic play style that I kind of notice we're doing sometimes. Is like we kind of play way too frantically to where we're kind of like we feel the urge, like I can kind of sense the urge to where you're like, I need to do something, I need to do something, I need to do something, right? And then that can sometimes lead into us making mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So honestly, like that is very, very true in your gameplay, but we also want to make sure that while we're trying to achieve carry potential, we're also not feeding in the meantime, right? Because then that can
Yeah.
get the adverse effect.
I should have prefaced that's what he's always told me,
Mm.
and these games were an example of me like trying to remedy that. So I might have, rolling into their backline might be a me trying to overcompensate and doing it very poorly.
Yep.
I normally play way more passive, and I like snipers. Like I
Mm.
one tricked Ash for pretty much all the time that I played. And Ash has its unique. Basically, you can make it a Masters by just playing the right high ground and landing your dynamites. But I definitely, you can see I struggle and I get panicked and frantic when I'm trying to like, okay, the fight's just now like starting. Like I need to do something quick before, you know, I'm just gonna be honest. Diamond tank players aren't the greatest, and neither am I. Like a diamond tank player, like I know that half the time I feed, and so does everyone else.
Mm.
So as a DPS, if I want to carry every game, I gotta be quick and make the right decision and get 2 picks before every fight starts,
Yeah.
basically, or
So
as the fight starts.
why don't like carrying real quick? Let's just talk about that, like, and how it, like, what that looks like. What carrying looks like on a DPS is what we talked about before, kind of with your Katie, is not dying while also getting a ton of kills. And how that is accomplished isn't by frantically running in and trying to do things kind of like in the way that we're trying to. How it's accomplished is we basically get consistent and we're doing all the things that I'm trying to get it. Basically, you stop making mistakes, right? And you start doing things. So when you, for example, get better positioning, get better with your mechanics and how we're shooting and who we're shooting at, right? And we get better with our awareness. It's going to keep us alive longer, and when you are alive longer, you're going to be able to actively do things more. And when we're in better positioning, we're going to be able to shoot things better and therefore get more kills. And ultimately, when we're making less mistakes and we're being more consistent and we have better awareness, better positioning, better ultimate usage, better ability usage, right? That's how essentially you carry, because now you're doing things while not dying. And that's really all carrying is doing a whole lot without getting yourself killed, right? And that's
See.
what we want to be. That's kind of what we want to be going for. Is that like is kind of that 10 KD? Is that's what like kind of what my goal is when I play a game, is like that's what I'm aiming for, right? Is to get to that level. And if I'm dying too much, or if I'm in a bad position, then that's me not carrying, because I'm not able to have an impact. So we want to make sure that we're having an impact while also staying alive, making less mistakes, and just shooting more often, right? And then that's kind of what carrying looks like on a DPS. Now it looks slightly different on some other roles, but on DPS in particular, you really, how you look to carry is you just make less mistakes, which is every character. That's how you carry on any character. Is you make less mistakes, so you're not throwing as much, and you look to get more consistent. And then through that, you're gonna get more kills and do more, right? So let's get back to the main points so that we can get through all that before we end the session here. Number one, it's looking like honestly a lot of the stuff is decently even. Like we talked about, almost an even. I'd probably say the top three are pretty, or even top four are like really even across the board. With what we needed to work on. I probably would say that that's going to be the number one thing, was just that like that understanding of carrying and aggression, and that understand. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Our understanding of carrying and our understanding of aggression, as well as just our making sure we're not frantically going in and feeding and dying and trying to go for a better KD. I don't really have too much of a word to describe that, but I guess we'll just summarize that as like play style, right? That's going to be number one. Not by a ton, but it is still a big thing, and we want to get that out of the way. That understanding of it, we kind of want to put that first, because that affects how we're approaching everything else, right?
Okay.
Now, number two, again, these other three are very, very close, but between our positioning, mechanics, and awareness. Though I'm probably going to say that our Honestly, it's so close, man. We'll just put it. I'm just gonna put some just so that you want to like start to focus on them individually. So they keep in mind they're very close, but I'm gonna put some ahead anyways. I'm just gonna put them in the front. I'm gonna put awareness at the front because there's just so much that went into that. Make sure that we're paying attention to our environment. We're watching kill feed because we made a lot of mistakes that came down to paying attention to our team. Pay attention to our team. Pay attention to the enemy team so we're not getting people sneaking up on us. Make sure that we are not holding on to our ultimate, but we're paying attention to our ultimate, and pay attention to health bars on their team so that we're not, when people are low, we're shooting at those people. And then all those really added up to awareness being a big deal, right? Then moving, and then just as a, I guess we talked about it recently enough. I don't have to do a reminder for kill feed watching, right? 1 to 2, 2 to
Yeah.
3. Then on from there, number 2, I'm probably going to put at mechanics. Or sorry, number 3. That's number 3 because we put playstyles as number 1. So number 3 is going to be your mechanics of just make sure we're keeping head level, make sure we're keeping good crosshair placement, and just practicing hitting our shots. Make sure that we are shooting at the right things. Shoot at DPS and supports, not tanks. Make sure we're doing things with our time and we're not playing too passive. I think it wasn't that we were constantly too passive. It was more so that we were just aggressive and passive in the wrong times. So it wasn't like all the time we were too passive or all the time we were too aggressive. It's just kind of like we had a mix of sometimes we were too passive, sometimes we were too aggressive in the wrong instances. So we want to make sure we're getting that fixed, right? Now we on from there. Some other things with mechanics, make sure we're not half charging our shots, make sure at longer ranges on Hanzo we're aiming above their heads. And then that is pretty much it for mechanics. Now, on from there, positioning comes in at number 4. Make sure that we are positioning at a mid-range on most of the characters that we talked about, right? Besides Widowmaker, right? McCree is 10 to 30 meters. Hanzo is roughly like 15, 20 to 30, 35, right? Prefer that distance. Try to stay there. Use cover properly. Don't be out in the open, right? Remember, good positioning is the usage of cover. Bad positioning is the absence of cover. Make sure we're taking high grounds and we're taking off angles so we can get around shields and tanks and also just more effectively stay alive and do things. And then and then on Widowmaker, make sure that we're changing our gameplay. That was another thing I forgot to mention in awareness. Pay attention to team compositions because team comp dictates playstyle. On Widow, when you're up against snipers, you're gonna be playing differently than when you're not. Take wider angles when you're not. Take more obscure angles when you are. Then on from there, we move on to the bottom 2. These are I'd probably say by far the ability usage is definitely our best by a long shot. Ultimate usage is kind of in the middle of all of them. So it's still needed work, especially, but it's also decently easy. Just using it more often is decently easy. Make sure we're using our ult more often. Make sure we're using it in any fight that's not been won or lost. Make sure we're not using it in a fight that's won or lost. Make sure we're not using it way too early before the fight's even begun. Make sure that we are, with our ultimate, we're not holding on to it, but we're using it, and so that we can actually get more out, actually do things with it. Dragon, Sonic, before you go for it, use it around the wall. Use it when they're in choke points and they can't run away from it. Look to throw it a little bit behind them, and also don't do it from like a medium range. McCree, make sure that we have 3 different ways we can go about it. Make sure that they're out in the open when we go for it so they can't just get ducked behind cover. Make sure that we are either doing one of 2 things. Use cover or protection from your team is how you can be very safe with it. Go for an off angle or a flank. That one's is probably one of the better options you can do with it. Gets you around shields, gets you around tanks, gives you a surprise angle and opportunity for it. And then finally, you can go for like a super far away one, like when they're all over there behind you from here. That can be pretty risky, so just be careful about how you're doing that one. Then on from there, good?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, and then finally, ability usage, not too much. Make sure we're not flashing from too far away. It's 10 meters, right? Sometimes flash from a little bit outside of it. From here, we can flash him. It explodes at 5 meters, right? And we can do it within that as well. But if we step outside of that, now we're too far away for it to hit them. So make sure we're understanding that range. Besides that, not a whole lot, right? Widowmaker, throw your Venom Mine down on top of yourself. It's just pretty fast, and it's going to help us fight against flankers pretty easily. If they don't have flankers, just toss it into them so you can get people damaged, and so you can see people through walls. Make sure we're holding it when they're on, like, flankers. They can get on top of us. We're saving grapple so that we can get away from them.
Understood.
Hanzo, Sonic off cooldown, Sonic
Every death
your flank angles so we know where people are coming from.
honor.
Besides that, Storm Arrow is really good. Jump was really good. Just don't jump into the enemy team. Right? Don't roll into the enemy team usually. Too. Bar a couple situations, that's okay.
Like a dragon.
All right, that was a lot. Some misc stuff that doesn't really fit into anything. Movement, just make sure we're mixing up our movement. We're not going forwards and backwards. We're not going too fast. We're not going too long. But instead, we're kind of doing a medium, adding crouches, randomize it, make it confusing for them, right? And then that is pretty much it. Do you have any questions about anything we've gone over?
Well, I have a specific question. It's probably not a great example, but like, the other night I played a game in like it was like 2 a.m. So it ended up throwing me in like honestly it was like a mid-masters lobby.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognized a player on the enemy team. He's a high-rated tank player. He was on a Smurf account where he's like a hog one trick or whatever.
Mhm.
But I can't really remember his name. He's not Owl or anything, but he's just, he's up there 4.3, 4.2, something like that.
Mhm.
And he was basically solo killing our entire team on Doom with a ball tracer combo like dive. And it was on Volskaya, and we basically, as a team, could not really make it out of spawn. And so my question, and it wasn't really like, as a DPS player, it's a little easier. What was happening is, we're running like basically the meta bar. I was on Hanzo for most of the game, and I was doing a decent job. I was getting picks. I wasn't really dying. But the rest, like our supports, were getting just absolutely demolished, and then every fight was lost at that point. So I swapped McCree. Actually, I remember vividly, like right off the bat, I'm kind of getting flamed. We're playing Hanzo, so I'm like, all right, fine, I'll go McCree. Flash ban, kill the Doom. Doesn't matter. By the time he gets back, our backline is already dead again to the other two people diving. It's like, how, as a person who's not mechanically able to really beat I hate when people talk about like Smurfs and Overwatch. It doesn't really matter. There's still 5 other people on their team that's equal to your skill level, so you can still kill them. But what do you do in that situation?
All right,
Like,
so first off, very insanely complicated question. There's a ton
I
of
know, I'm sorry.
ton of variables that could go into it. From basically you making any of the mistakes that you made here to that would affect your gameplay. Swap McCree faster because McCree is a much better pick versus a dive than Hanzo is. He has more health, which will allow him to survive easier. He has his flashbang, which is going to allow him to stun them and allow him to kill them much easier. And it's also easier to hit fast-moving targets with a hit scan shot than a projectile shot. So just swapping McCree is fast. Other than that, just keep in mind some games are just gonna be losable, like no matter what you do. Now. Like kind of how it works like when it comes to that is, and this is a quote from like Jane, is that like I'm assuming you know who that is, right? It's a Overwatch League coach, right? In any case,
that's my best friends. Like they're partners. They work together.
That's cool.
Through the dragons.
Yeah, so in any case, he says that roughly 1/3 of your games are, no matter what you do, going to be a lost game. 1/3 are going to be, no matter what you do, a won game. And then 1/3 you have an impact on. Now, that's not exactly 100% true because that's how you get people who climb like hundreds of SR and have like an 80% win rate. But essentially, how it works is that's kind of an average. But you getting better at the game means that you kind of expand your realm of influence. As you get better, you therefore are able to have more of an impact, and then that's how you get into carrying. But at the moment, like, just keep in mind that sometimes there's not going to be a ton that you can do at your current skill level. So just focus on really working on on the things that you're trying to work on. Look for what mistakes am I making. Think about how can I improve. With while keeping in mind that sometimes just a Smurf who's much better than you might just win the game for them. So that's just gonna happen. Sometimes you're just gonna get a bad team, but your mindset should always be to improve and to work on yourself, because if you do, then eventually you're gonna get good enough to where you can carry against that Smurf, because then you're a Smurf versus a Smurf, and you can get to that level where you can carry those players who are bad. In that game, I can't necessarily give you any specific advice to what you could have done better without seeing any gameplay from it. But that's really the main things, right? You can
Okay.
practice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a bad question, really, because you haven't seen the game. I
Yeah.
just like there are very few things that happen in Overwatch. I guess this kind of comes back to awareness a little bit, but um, most of the time, like when I die or when I lose a game, I can generally understand why.
Mm,
I just haven't gotten better in those particular areas.
mm,
And so like it's pretty easy to see like, okay, I could have not rolled into the enemy team and
yeah.
fed. I could have done any other thing and probably been okay. It just isn't muscle memory yet to make those right decisions. But in a situation like that, man, I was just sitting there like, holy shit, like what can I possibly do? And
And
I think the
sometimes
answer is probably nothing.
yeah, so sometimes the answer is going to be nothing at your current skill level. Now, like, like we just discussed, if you get better, if your mechanics are better, if you made less mistakes, if you died less, then maybe that means that you're getting more kills. It could, if you're more consistent, it might mean that you swap to McCree faster. It might mean that you get more kills, and then that sometimes gets into like maybe your team's tilted, and if you were doing better at the very beginning of the game, that might stop your team from getting tilted to begin with, which possibly can put you at an advantage. So ultimately, like, if you were a 4.3 player, you might be able in a Masters lobby, you might be able to do well enough that you could carry your team. And that's actually going to be the case most of the time. Even against another Smurf, you can kind of bat out with them, right? But at your current level, just keep in mind there's gonna be some times where you're not able to do that. And your goal is to get to that point. So really focus on the things you're trying to focus on, right? Just as a reminder, that's what we said earlier, right? How you're looking to improve on stuff is you focus on it one thing at a time, one category, one to three smaller things, and then that's going to be how you get better. So if you're losing a game, focus on something, right? That's what your goal is going to be. But just keep in mind that not every single game is going to be winnable. There is definitely something you could have done in every single game, but at your current skill level, there's not always going to be that game that you can win. If I went into a game with 6 owl players or even 1 owl player, right, might not be able to carry against that, right? At my current skill level, I used to be better.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying though.
All right. So, yep. Do you have any other questions?
No, I wrote down pretty much like five main things that I want to try and individually work on. So I'm hoping that maybe next weekend or sometime